Mew. It appears only to those who are pure of heart and have a strong desire to see it. Mew is one of those Pokemon that you hear of, that you see of, that you've seen people play, that you've never got to play. And if you take a look at its Bulbapedia page here on Generation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you're only able to get a Mew via an event. And I don't know about you, but I was never the one to actually go to events because I was always the one to purchase the game secondhand after the game became cheaper. Surprisingly, this is not my first time playing with Mew. In Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, if you had a game save from Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu or Eevee, in one of the first towns in the entire game, you're able to be given a Mew. And I played the entire game with that Mew because Mew is just so good. Now, of course, Mew is going to be able to beat Generation 8. But can Mew beat Generation 2? Let's find out. We pick up our Mew from Professor Elm and make our way towards Mr. Pokemon's house. Mr. Pokemon is quite the chatty fellow, but he gets interrupted by Professor Oak, who tells us just how good of a guy we are, and he gives us a Pokedex, where we will fill it up just like Generation 1 and further our understanding about Pokemon. After our chat, we leave and Professor Elm then gives us a call telling us we need to make our way back. On our way back, we run into this red-haired fellow who is clearly named Triple Question Mark and we need to battle him. But unfortunately for him, it's not going to be a very fair fight. We've got 2 levels on him, and our pound move is pretty good this early in the game. After the battle, we arrive back at Professor Elm's place, where we see a policeman, and we inform him that the red-haired fellow is none other than Triple Question Mark, and that he needs to be caught at all costs. And with that information, he then makes his way out of the laboratory as we talk to Professor Elm. Professor Elm mentions that this Pokemon egg is actually a very big discovery and we need to make sure that we treat it with respect. Then, on our way to the gym, we run into this Bellsprout, who is good for both cut and flash, so I make sure to go ahead and catch it with the Pokeball, before then arriving to the end of Sprout Tower, where we end up seeing the red-haired rival, Triple Question Mark, arguing about how they should treat Pokemon, as the Elder wants them to treat them fairly and the rival doesn't care. After beating him ourselves, he manages to give us Flash and tell us just how good of a person we are. We grab the escape rope and then we make our way for the Violet City Gym, where we find 2 trainers that stand no chance against Mew as we arrive to Falkner. Although not nearly as strong as Lugia, Mew still does do a very good job against Falkner's Pokemon because his Pokemon choose not to use Mud Slap, the signature move of his gym, and that costs him very dearly, which then takes us to Union Cave, where we manage to pick up the Swift TM and then immediately teach both Swift and Mud Slap. Both of these moves a major upgrade. Swift an upgrade over Pound, and Mud Slap for type coverage. Then we run into Kurt in Azalea Town, where he tells us that he can't make any more balls because of Team Rocket, and he's going to go ahead and give them a piece of his mind at the Slowpoke well. Then the last Rocket manages to tell us that Team Rocket is back, baby. Anyways, Kurt then brings us back to his house, where he lets us know that he'd be honored to make balls for us, and then hands us a lure ball. With Team Rocket taken care of, we can then head ourselves over to the Azalea City Gym, where we face Bugsy. Bugsy then starts out with the usual Metapod, and we use a Swift. Unfortunately, Swift doesn't knock it out in one hit, but after the second hit we then learn Mega Punch, which comes right in time for us to go against Scyther. Scyther does have Fury Cutter, and this could do major damage to us if it gets enough hits in. Luckily, 2 Mega Punches is enough to get through Scyther, and Kakuna is no problem whatsoever either. This takes us to the entrance of the Ilex Forest, where our rival is once again blocking the way. This battle is the reason why we taught Mud Slap, as Swift, Mega Punch, and Pound aren't going to be able to damage the Ghastly. Luckily, Mud Slap is super effective against Ghastly, and then from here it shouldn't be too much of an issue as long as Mega Punch can manage to hit its target, and Croconaw doesn't have any super effective attacks to stop our 2 Mega Punches from taking it down. At the beginning of the Ilex Forest, we run into the store owner's son, who says he's missing his Farfetch'd and we need to retrieve it. So we head around town, manage to get it from the back, and return it back to the owner's son, who's right back in time to appreciate just what we've done for him. He then gives us Cut in appreciation for all of the hard work, and that it can be used on any tree as long as we have the Azalea badge. So I teach it to the Bellsprout we caught a little bit earlier on the run and make our way toward the Headbutt lady. She then tells us about the wonders of Headbutt and all the things that we could do with Headbutt. But I need to make my way towards Goldenrod where I can do my daily chores, including grabbing the coin case from the underground, then getting the haircut to increase the speed at which my Pokemon gains friendship levels to increase the power of return later. Then followed by going to the casino to grab 100 coins where I can then head over to the operator to get an Abra. So that way I can teleport to the nearest Pokemon Center in dire situations. And last but certainly not least, to grab the moves that makes Mew just such a good Pokemon. It can learn all the punch moves, Fire Punch, Thunder Punch, and Ice Punch. And once we teach all of those moves, we're going to have significantly good coverage throughout the rest of the game. Plus, we just picked up Headbutt, which is a 70 power move that has 100 accuracy. So we can ditch our 80 power move with 85% accuracy Mega Punch. Now this isn't going to be our final move set, but it's going to be our move set for the majority of the game. Then we make our way over to the radio tower where we can get the radio card, which won't be used until we hit the Kanto portion of the game. The quiz answers are as follows: yes, yes, no, yes, and no. If you want to know the question, slow down the footage. Then we make our way north towards this guard who wants us to do an errand for him. He wants us to find his chubby friend who snoozes on Route 31 and hand him the Pokemon containing the mail. We will do no such thing and make our way towards the north and grab the Quick Claw, and then we immediately give it to our Pokemon as there really isn't too many better options early in the game. Continue our way east and talk to Flower Shop's Floria, who then tells us about the Wiggling Tree just a little bit to the east. And then she'll let her sister know that we can borrow her water bottle. However, if you talk to her again, she requires that we beat Whitney. So we make our way towards the gym to try and get an easy victory. Interestingly enough, Mew is actually quite a tanky Pokemon. Unfortunately, no matter how tanky you are, Nightshade is still going to get through. But on the Miltank Stomp here, we take a very low amount of damage before then taking down Miltank for the win. But it's not over yet, as Whitney is then left crying as we have to go back and make sure to ask her please for the badge. Then we make our way to the house directly east of the gym, where Floria then warns us about the dangers of the tree once again, and her sister then manages to give us the squirt bottle, which then sets us on our path towards Ecruteak, where we then use the squirt bottle on the mysterious Pokemon. However, because we don't need to battle it, we run away. In Ecruteak, we manage to run into this dojo with all these colorfully dressed women. Once we've beaten all the women, we talk to this guy who manages to give us the TM for surf, which will allow us to surf on the ocean, which then takes us over to the Burn Tower, where we talk to this guy who apparently is a Suicune expert. Unfortunately for him, he can't find a Suicune, but we run into the rival, who is also looking for the legendary Pokemon, but clearly they're already gone. Battling us is going to be a consolation prize. Unfortunately, we're nobody's consolation prize, as we take down the Haunter with 2 Thunder Punches, followed by Croconaw with a single Thunder Punch, followed by Magnemite, which is actually going to be very easy thanks to Fire Punch, and then Zubat, which could go down to Thunder Punch or Ice Punch, and then he insults us by saying we'll never catch a legendary Pokemon anyways. Unfortunately for him, we managed to see the legendary Pokemon at this moment. Then the Suicune expert comes right back up to us again and tells us that the legendary beasts only allow people to see them, which means it was very fortunate that we were able to see him. Well, regardless, we need to work our way towards Morty next, who is going to be the ghost type gym leader. Now, even though our moveset is so diverse, you can tell by the left-hand side of the screen our power isn't going to change, and therefore we're not going to have an advantage in this matchup. However, that doesn't stop us from getting a crit on the Haunter. However, Gengar then takes advantage of the situation, puts us to sleep. But Generation 2 sleep, even though not nearly as bad as it is in Generation 1, is still pretty bad. It can last 1 to 6 turns, but you can attack on waking up. Unfortunately, I do not wake up. Unfortunately, the next attempt, the exact same thing happens. And not only that, we actually fall asleep the maximum amount of turns. So that means we get to stay asleep all 6 turns before we eventually finally wake up and hit it with a Thunder Punch, which of course does not take it out, but luckily the next one does. And because the next hunter can't hit us with 2 Nightshades, we're gonna get the win. Next up, we're gonna head west to Olivine City, where we talk to this old man who gives us the good rod. Then we fish in the sea to the south of Olivine City, where we encounter a Krabby on the very first try. And luckily, this Krabby just barely hangs on to a Fire Punch, as we're then able to go ahead and use the 1 lure ball we got from Kurt to catch the Krabby on the first go. Then there's this guy on the west side of Olivine who says our Pokemon are all lightweights and can't move boulders, therefore we need to learn Strength, and he gives us the HM for Strength. Then at the top of the lighthouse we grab the rare candy, then meet up with Jasmine at the top of the lighthouse, who says the Ampharos there is very sick and needs some medicine that can only be found in Cianwood City. So we meet up with this guy who gives us that medicine. And while we're here, we're going to go ahead and make our way towards Chuck, the gym leader of the Cianwood Gym. Unfortunately for him, we've got pretty good type advantage on our side. Primeape is then first, and we hit it with a headbutt, which manages a crit, allowing us to move on to Poliwrath. And with Thunder Punch, this is going to be easy, as we only take a Surf for a little amount of damage before then getting the win. And then outside, as I stumble around just a little bit, as we then talk to Chuck's wife, who says crossing the sea must have been very difficult. And then she hands us the Fly HM. But not only that, she says that her husband really needs to train harder, which is good, because he was actually getting a little bit chubby. As our journey then moves east, as we then move on to Mahogany Town. But before then, I walk in this grass and then find Entei. Wow, I actually had no idea what to do. So instead of using a Pokeball like a smart person, I decided to try and weaken it with a Thunder Punch, as I forgot that it was actually going to flee immediately. But it's not a big deal, as a Pokeball just wasn't going to catch it anyways. As we then work our way on the west side of Lake of Rage, through the little hedge maze, as we then pick up the rare candy. And I learned a little bit of a tip here. You can actually fly from the rare candy position to the Lake of Rage itself, saving us a little bit of walking time through all of the grass. As we then approach Gyarados, which is obviously going to be a one-shot with Thunder Punch, because it's quadruple super effective. And as we make our way towards the Mahogany Gym, we walk into this fellow. He says his name is Lance, and that all the Gyarados in the lake are evolving for some reason. We follow him back to Mahogany Town, where he assaults this gentleman, but then finds out that it's a secret organization. But cool pro tip here is when you're in the organization, you can go to this computer, click on it, and the switches will now turn off, saving you quite a few battles, as you can now walk through the statue area without having to do 2 battles apiece, saving us 6 entire battles. I never knew about that button as a kid. Meeting Lance, who says we should split up. So we start working our way through the hideout, battling trainers as we go, as we meet this woman, who then tells us the password is Slowpoke's tail, without a space, followed by this guy, who then tells us the password is Raticate's tail, but with a space. As we start making our way towards the boss Rocket, we then run back into our rival again, who says he's trying to beat the Rockets himself for some reason. But he gets pissed and goes away. Now, the boss Rocket here, he said he's waiting for Giovanni to take the reins back of the Team Rocket and return it to its former glory. So we can't have that happen. With all the passwords back in hand, we start making our way toward the generator. However, we get stopped by 2 Rockets, who then ambush us and argue who's going to take us first. Luckily, Lance comes into the rescue, and we only have to battle one of them. Lance then informs us of the radio broadcast that's actually causing all of the Magikarp to evolve into Gyarados. So we take down all of the Electrode, now it's all shut down, and the Rockets have been defeated, and Lance gives us the Whirlpool HM. But more importantly, this unlocks the gym, so now we can actually take on Pryce, and after one short maze later, we can then begin the battle. Pryce is typically known as the easiest gym leader in Johto, and as you can tell, we were able to take down Seal with 1 Thunder Punch. However, Dugong takes 2 Thunder Punches, and the most difficult part of this battle is deciding if we keep Psychic or not. And even though it's a big power upgrade, we need all of our moves throughout the rest of this run. So we take down Piloswine and get ourselves the win. With Pryce's badge in hand, we can then go back to Jasmine, give her the medicine, and she gives the medicine to Ambrose and its well-being is much better, allowing her to return to the gym, allowing us a battle. Jasmine is next, and she's normally quite the difficult trainer. However, today we have Fire Punch, and all of her Pokemon are very weak to Fire Punch. Even Steelix cannot survive a single Fire Punch and gets us the win. The moment we step out of the gym, Professor Elm calls and he says that there's something odd with the radio tower. It even sounded like Team Rocket. So we need to investigate. But before we get to that, I need to head over to the Goldenrod Mart to pick up an upgrade to Headbutt, aka Return. And by now, Return should be at max strength. With what appears to be our final moveset for quite some time, we work our way over to the radio tower, where it isn't very long before we make it to the top floor, where we find out it's a fake director, and we need to head to the underground to find the real director. However, in the middle of all of this, I remembered that we still need to pick up some rare candies, so I fly over to Violet City and then surf over to this little island to pick up a rare candy, followed by heading over to Goldenrod, where I head south and then swim across to an island, but the rare candy is actually in the trees. Then we get right back on point and head to the basement, where, after going through this door, we then run right back into the rival, who says he wants to take care of the Rockets, and that our last victory was a fluke, but we'll teach him as we're able to take down Golbat with an Ice Punch, followed by then him sending out Sneasel, who is weak to a Fire Punch. Followed by him then throwing out Feraligatr, which is weak to a Thunder Punch. I really did expect it to survive a hit that time, but Magnemite then goes down to a Fire Punch, bringing out his final Pokemon, Haunter, which is going to be the strongest one on the team, but unfortunately a critical hit does not allow him to get very far. After a spiel about being the best, we then work our way through the underground, battling all the trainers, and then solving the little puzzle, which is 3, then 2, and then the last one is 1, and after we're done with that little puzzle, we can make our way through the rest of the area. After a handful of battles, we then make it to the actual director, who thanks us for rescuing him, and then gives us the key card to the 3rd floor of the radio tower. Once we eventually arrive to the 3rd floor of the radio tower, we use the newly acquired key card, battle a few trainers, and then make it to the top floor, where the boss Rocket then has plans to announce the return of Team Rocket. Unfortunately for him, we're just a little too much for him, and then the director returns and gives us the clear bell, which we will have absolutely no use for. Then we head downstairs to grab the pink bow from Mary, and this will increase the power of return by an extra 10%. But more importantly, it's a held item that actually does something, as Quick Claw is probably pretty useless as we're most likely faster than every Pokemon. With the Rockets defeated, we can finally head over east of Mahogany through the ice path where we complete the ice maze, or at least struggle until we eventually find the answer and then eventually get Waterfall. While trying to get better at the game, I then stumbled across a speed run, which then taught me that you don't actually need to push down all of the boulders. You really only need to push down one boulder and then fall down the correct hole. So we push down this boulder, which is actually the first boulder that we come across, then move that boulder out of the way, fall down, move up, and boom, we're out of the cave. I make sure to pick up the TM for rest on the way out. This clears the path for us to then battle Clair. But just like the previous gym leaders before, having all of the punch moves at our advantage is a significant advantage in this battle, as we're able to take down all 3 Dragonairs using just Ice Punch. However, Kingdra is part water type and therefore resists ice moves, so we switch over to a return attack which gets the job done and gets our badge. Or so I thought, until we had to head over to the Dragon's Den and answer this old guy's quiz questions. Unfortunately, at the time of doing this, I didn't actually know the answers to all of the quiz questions. I just assumed as long as I answered the questions, he would just give me a Dratini. Unfortunately, you had to answer the questions correctly to get their Dratini. I thought the difference was you got an extreme speed Dratini or you got a regular Dratini. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. Luckily, Claire does eventually give us the badge, and on our way out, she manages to give us the TM for Dragon Breath, which is useless to us. However, she does make a funny joke, saying it isn't the TM for her breath. Then, on the way out, Professor Elm then gives us a call and tells us that we need to stop by the lab. And then, once we arrive at the lab, he then gives us the Master Ball for some reason, saying that only researchers are allowed to be able to use it, which seems illegal, like an item that you're not allowed to actually give. But anyways, we make our way onto the Elite Four, but before that, we make sure to pick up the rare candy. Once in Victory Road, I then make sure not to cut anything, as it's a very short Victory Road, and I mean really short. As you can see, we have literally already arrived, and it's been like 20 seconds. The rival arrives, tells us his team is far stronger now and that we have no chance. But unfortunately for him, we still have all of the punches, so his Sneasel doesn't stand any sort of chance. His Golbat, of course, goes down to an Ice Punch. And unlike Lugia, who got paralyzed off of Magneton, we have no such issue as Fire Punch manages to take down Magneton. Even the only difficult Pokemon, Haunter, manages to go down in one hit. Kadabra then goes down to one return, as its physical defense is terrible, followed by Feraligatr, who actually does not survive a single hit, which will be the last time we see a rival, and therefore the last Steel type that we really need Fire Punch for. So I teach Shadow Ball for all future Psychic types. Without anything left, Will is the only place left to go. There are a few Pokemon that I wanted to teach Shadow Ball for, but Will is specifically the reason why, as we take down Xatu with the Shadow Ball, followed by the next Xatu with another Shadow Ball. Then for Jinx, it's physically defensive, and Shadow Ball is a physical move, followed by Executor, which I thought was going to survive a Shadow Ball, but didn't. Slowbro is tanky, so it does survive a Shadow Ball and Will is defeated. Koga, off a promotion from Gen 1, is now the second Elite Four member. In this game, they actually managed to give him a pretty diverse set of poison types, except for one. Fortress. It doesn't look like a bug, it doesn't look like it's poison type, I just don't understand it. But anyways, we move on to Venomoth, who then gets taken down by a return, which then brings it to his tried and true Muck, which also doesn't stand really much of a chance against return. But it does get a Sludge Bomb in, which is more than you can say for the rest of his team, as Crobat is then taken out with the Thunder Punch, taking us to Bruno next, as he now has an upgraded team. Hitmontop is first, and it's a new addition to his team. It does have a Dark type move, which could have been good if it didn't go down in one hit, followed by Onix, which goes down to an Ice Punch, followed by Hitmonchan, which still has a very low special attack stat, so most of its attacks are useless. Then Machamp with a significantly improved moveset, as it doesn't include Submission anymore and goes with better moves like Cross Chop and Vital Throw. Then Hitmonlee, which is pretty good, but unfortunately against Mew it's not enough, taking us to Karen, the rival 2 of Generation 2. I like to give her this nickname because she likes to start off with Sand Attack or Confuse Ray. In this case, she uses Sand Attack, which was significantly worse for us. Luckily, we still have a pretty good moveset as we take down Murkrow with a Thunder Punch, and then Houndoom with a Return, even though we don't have a good move against it. Followed by Gengar, which now we have Shadow Ball, which is a significant improvement over our last time we played against some ghost types. And then Vileplume can be taken down with an Ice Punch just as soon as we can manage to get past some paralysis. Taking us to Lance, the supposed Dragon Trainer whose team comprises of only flying types. Now Gyarados is one of the reasons why we kept Thunder Punch over Fire Punch. As you can see, we can take it down in one hit. Gyarados is typically one of the worst parts of the Lance battle, so getting past him this easily is quite the godsend. And then, once we get to the Dragonites, it's as simple as Ice Punching. And then, unlike Lugia, we can take down Aerodactyl with a single Ice Punch, taking us to Charizard, which is part Flying type, and therefore very susceptible to a Thunder Punch. Taking us to his final Dragonite next, which obviously goes down to an Ice Punch just like the rest. An extra level doesn't make a difference. With that victory, Oak then comes up and tells us just how impressed he is, and that we have such a great relationship with our Pokemon, and therefore he believed in us. After a little interview attempt by Mary, we then get moved over to the Champion Room, where Lance then registers our Pokemon. it gets cut short as I reset. Once back in Newbark Town, Professor Elm then tells us we should visit him in his lab. He then gives us the SS ticket, which can be used to travel to Kanto, and it takes off in Olivine. Once we make our way to Olivine, we get past the bouncer and work our way into the ship, where we get interrupted by this old guy who's looking for his granddaughter. But first, in order to find her, we need to talk to this guard who says his friend is loafing about. So we go to this room where we find he actually is loafing about, and after a victory he gets back to work. Then after that we can walk by the guard and then make our way towards the captain's room, where the little girl seems to be trying to play with the captain. We let her know that the grandfather is looking for her, and she returns us to the grandfather's room, who gives us Metal Coat in appreciation. Once in Vermilion City, we then talk to the Pokemon fan guy, who then gives us a rare candy for listening to his speech instead of the bike voucher. We then work our way over to the power plant that used to house Zapdos, but now is an actual power plant, and therefore we talk to the plant manager, who mentions that his engine is missing a part and that he would really like for us to find that part. Then, while trying to visit Misty, we run into this Rocket, who says he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. So we ignore him, head over to Misty, who's going to be hanging out by Bill's house. But first, we have to beat all of the Nugget Bridge trainers, who decided to move up north just a little bit for some odd reason. But you still battle all of the trainers, and then make your way to Misty, who then calls us a pest for ruining her date. However, her tone then changes as she notices just how many badges we have, and says we should meet her up in her gym. Once in her gym, we then swim over to her, picking the machine part up on the way there, and then starting the battle. Now we're definitely going to show Misty who's the pest here, as we take down Golduck with a single Thunder Punch, followed by Starmie with a single Thunder Punch, although Shadow Ball would have been better. Quagsire, not really gonna have a good move for that, but Return will do the trick, followed by Lapras, who will use a Thunder Punch, but it survives with that incredibly high HP stat, but doesn't survive the next one. We then work our way back to the power plant and talk to the manager, where he is so grateful he then gives us the TM for Zap Cannon. But he is even aware of just how bad the move is, and literally tells us it's not the most accurate move, but it packs a wallop. Then make our way to the Lavender Town radio tower, where the man then hands us the EXPN card for saving his job over at the power plant. We then immediately use this EXPN card to access the Pokeflute on the radio, where we wake up Snorlax. However, we are going to catch this Snorlax thanks to the Master Ball we were given earlier. This Snorlax is then holding leftovers, so we'll take that away from him and then give it to our Mew, which will give it an unfair advantage in the rest of the game. Now that the storyline is basically over, we're going to go ahead and make a tour of all the gym leaders, starting with Surge. As previously mentioned on another video, the only weakness that electric types have are ground moves, aka Dig and Earthquake. However, they also don't necessarily have a very high defense, except for Magneton, so Return is just going to be the answer here. And because I delayed Surge just a little bit longer, I'm actually able to outspeed the Electrodes this time before they're even able to set up a double team, so I don't have any shenanigans while missing. So with the Snorlax gone, I can then make my way over to Brock. Alright, spoiler alert, but Brock is going to be a one-shot sweep. However, one thing to note here is Amistar and Kabutops are both rock-water types, and as you can see from our little display there on the left-hand side of the screen, our Ice Punch actually gets weaker against them, showing that it's actually the ground typing that's weak against ice. Though they're actually resistant to our ice move, and not actually weak to it at all. Not that it mattered, because we have Thunder Punch making the difference in this game. After making a quick trip through Viridian and Pallet Town, we can then go south, towards Cinnabar Island. However, Cinnabar is now gone. But we do meet up with Blue, and he tells us he was once the champion, but only for a short time because of that meddling Red. So that means that Red is actually the player from the first game, which is a cool little tidbit. After grabbing the rare candy, we can then make our way east, where we can find Blaine hiding out in a cave. Well, Blaine has been swindled out of his Arcanine, and he was given him a cargo. Nobody knows exactly how it happened, but we assume it's Ash trading as Butterfree for Eradicate style type of trade. Anyways, the rest of his Pokemon really don't stand a chance to Mew, and we take down all of his Pokemon rather quickly without losing any HP. This then brings us to Koga's daughter, Janine. And well, there's not much we can say about Janine. Janine's Pokemon are all in their level 30s, so literally anything from any Pokemon can take her Pokemon down. Any Pokemon can learn Return, so at this point, if your Pokemon has Return, like it probably should have, we'll be able to just one-shot everything on Janine's team, especially if you were able to beat the Elite Four, probably with literally any Pokemon. On the way to Erika, I then make sure to stop by the back of one of the big houses, where we make it to the top and then we talk to this guy, who gives us Curse, which will be our backup strategy for Red. Once finished with that, we battle the 3 mandatory trainers in Erika's gym, and then we make it to Erika herself. Erika is another one of those reasons why we didn't really need Fire Punch, because Ice Punch is going to be just as good on her Grass-type Pokemon. Interestingly enough, some of the Pokemon on her team I've actually never even considered using, like both Blossom and Jumpluff. I'm actually very curious if they're any good. Victory Bell, on the other hand, we have used, and it is very good. This then takes us into Sabrina, who's obviously going to be a joke with Shadow Ball. Interestingly enough, the Pokemon that we always make fun of is Venomoth, and Venomoth is not on our team, but Venomoth would have been the only Pokemon that could have survived a Shadow Ball. Honestly though, we probably would have taken it down with a Return, but that's besides the point. Anyways, Espeon's pretty cool, but Red uses it better. Fresh off a butt whooping of the rest of the gym leaders, we now arrive at Blue. Back at Cinnabar Island, Blue confessed to us that he's still very butthurt about losing to Red in the championship. Unfortunately for him, losing is just in his DNA, as we then take down Alakazam with a one-shot, leading us to Rhydon. But Rhydon is very weak to Ice Punch, and therefore doesn't like the cold. Gyarados is absurdly weak to Thunder Punch, and therefore doesn't survive a single hit. Moving on to Exeggutor. Exeggutor is quite tanky, and as you can tell by the bottom hand side of the screen with the P, Ghost type is physical, and therefore it's right in Exeggutor's wheelhouse, so it takes 2 shots. However, Arcanine is quite a bit more balanced, and we don't have a move that's good against it, so it's actually a 2-shot with Return, completing the Johto Gym Challenge. Then taking us to Oak, who says the trainers in Kanto are actually quite good, which is quite a lie, honestly. But he then allows us to go into Mount Silver. But before we get to the mountain, we need to go through some of these trees and pick up the last of the rare candies. This isn't the actual last rare candy, but it's the last one that I can get easily before arriving to the terror of Kanto, Red. In Generation 1, I typically have the plan. I know usually how everything's gonna go, and therefore I typically use all my rare candies at the beginning of the battle. However, I wanted to show you guys that brute forcing our way through Red is probably not the right idea. So I go in without teaching any new moves or using any rare candies. As expected, the Snorlax is then giving us a lot of problems, as we can't really use any of our punch moves because they're just not very effective, and Return is also not doing very much, as we get paralyzed and then taken out with a few body slams. Now, I wanted to keep things interesting. I didn't want to use the same old strategy, so I decided to go with a little bit different of a moveset. I wanted to go with Return and then Dynamic Punch, along with Curse and Rest. People typically like to go with Sleep Talk, but I figured Dynamic Punch would be a little bit cooler, especially since Mew can learn all of the moves. Dynamic Punch is a 50% accurate 100 base power fighting move, so it should be able to one-shot the Snorlax no problem. However, this strategy is very slow. Therefore, on the Espeon, because we have a resistance to all of Espeon's moves except for Mud Slap, we should be able to safely use all of our Curse attacks, making us slow as dirt, but the most beefy Pokemon you'd ever seen. And beef is exactly what we need for a Return Dynamic Punch strategy. However, what I didn't expect is that we're going to not be able to buff our special defense, and the majority of Red's Pokemon except Snorlax all use special, and therefore what we're really doing is making it so we take the first hit. However, when we do finally attack, we do a load of damage, as seen by the one shot there of Espeon, followed by Snorlax here, who we obviously are going to go with the Dynamic Punch, which manages to hit on the first try, and one-shot the Snorlax, which is no small feat. But before long, the Charizard then uses a Flamethrower, which deals a surprising amount of damage. So we then use our attacks, but unfortunately, it's because of the Reflect we weren't able to one-shot the Charizard. And now, because of how slow we are, the Blastoise is going to be able to take us out with a Surf. It's not a big deal, as we then can use 3 rare candies to put ourselves at the next damage rounding threshold. For those of you who don't know, that would be any level that ends in 0, 3, 5, or 8. Just trust me, it has to do with damage rounding down. Anyways, we get back to the Espeon no problem. And now we actually have a little bit more special defense, not that it really makes much of a difference. But the big difference is if we get hit by an Espeon Psychic attack, and this is because Psychic then has a chance to lower your special defense, and as we mentioned previously, the majority of his Pokemon rely on special attacks, therefore it would be a very big detriment to our overall chance of winning. After being fully set up, we can then move on to Snorlax, who we actually managed to one-shot once again with Dynamic Punch, proving it was no fluke. However, back at Charizard with 3/4 HP, things are not going very well. However, this time, he didn't have a Reflex setup, therefore we're able to one-shot the Charizard. And because we survived a hit from Blastoise, we were able to rest. Now all that matters is that Blastoise can't 3-shot us. Unfortunately, it looks like there's a very good chance that it could. But in Generation 2, as I mentioned, the moment you wake up is the moment you're allowed to attack, and therefore we're able to take down Blastoise with one use of Return. And then Venusaur is no issue with Return as well, making us the champion of the entire Kanto region. We've beaten the game at 146 real time, 647 game time, at level 69 with 3 resets. The 4th reset was to skip a load of time after beating the Pokemon League. Also, at the beginning of the video, I forgot to start the timer early enough. However, that only proved to be a 30-second difference, which doesn't even change the time by 1 minute. Being the second Pokemon to be finished here on the channel, I've actually improved my gameplay styles and found a few shortcuts, so it's no surprise that I've been able to absolutely destroy the Lugia time. However, it was at a significantly higher level, and that probably does say something. Once again, big thanks to my 3 Patreon members, John Warlord Hughes, Wired Squid, and Speedrunner0218. My next video, voted on by the channel poll, is going to be Ho-Oh. My last video focused on the shinies, this video focused on the story. I can't wait to see what I'll come up with the Ho-Oh video. But if you haven't watched the Lugia video, make sure to check out the channel link in the top right hand corner of the screen. If you've stayed this far, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you.